Did you finish your work? Have you packed everything you need? Does this sound familiar? I know that in my house, these phrases are very common, which is why I'm so excited for our guest today. Carrie works with executive function coaching, and she works with adults and kids. And so today I'm really excited to kind of dig into some of these cognition topics, learn a little bit more about the brain so that we can help ourselves and help the kids that we work with, whether they're in our homeschool or in our classrooms. So I'm going to bring Carrie on up. Carrie, thanks for being here. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, could you tell us a little bit about you and what you do to help families?
Sure. So I'm Carrie Bonnett. I am an executive function coach. What does that mean? That means we'll talk a lot about executive functions in our conversation today, but that means that I help students and families and some adults too, like you mentioned, figure out how to understand their brains better and then figure out how to get their things done. So we'll get into this in a little bit, but executive functions are skills that help us get our stuff done. Yeah. I come at this from the teacher angle. So I was a classroom teacher for a long time, and I still do some teaching, although right now I'm teaching teachers, early career teachers in graduate school. But I also, my main gig is this coaching practice where I work one-on-one with students and families and adults, and I have some parent groups and teacher training. And I just like to get the word out about executive function as much as I possibly can.
I love it. Well, I know that one of my favorite classes in college was my cognition class, even though it wasn't in the education school proper. Like it was fascinating to me. And so I feel like I kind of run back to that every once in a while in my classes. And that's really, really important. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I really appreciate it. So if we're thinking about executive functions, what are some of the things that we can do to tell something's off? Are there any like tip off points where we're like, something might be
well, sure. Parents come to me most of the time. I hear from parents first, most of the time. And parents will often come to me because you even said it in your intro. Did you finish your work? Because there are lots of missing assignments. Maybe the backpack or the bedroom is a mess. Maybe they are forgetting items, right? You said you pack everything you need. Yeah, they're forgetting things. They're forgetting to turn things in. Their child is sort of struggling with time. Like, how do I get places on time or get out the door on time, or just awareness of time? So oftentimes those are some of the red flags, right? Like these little annoying things for a parent, right?
Absolutely.
But also you can imagine they're probably pretty annoying for a student in a classroom too. So, and teachers, I suppose too.
Totally. But as teachers, I feel like, and as I didn't know that part about your teacher training. That's really cool that you're working with, they're in their master's program, it sounds like. So there's so much, and especially, I guess, if they're in a master's program, perhaps they've already had some time in the classroom, but that is such a part of our teacher training is classroom management. So for the teachers in the room and for the homeschoolers in the room who may not have that teacher kind of background, is there any way to preempt some of these struggles or try to head them off before they really snowball?
Of course. I mean, for teachers, so like I said, I do some teacher training. I work with families. Like the thing that I would say in terms of preempting challenges in these areas is routine and structure and consistency. The thing about brains is that, our brains are really good at sort of learning new things and doing new stuff. And some brains really like that and they seek out novelty. In fact, a lot of the brains that I work with seek out new stuff, exciting things. But it takes a lot of energy, brain energy, to do something new. So the more there can be a routine that is known and a student knows exactly what to do where they put their backpack, where they turn in their homework, where they sit, where the shoes go, if whatever it is, the routine and the consistency and the structure is really important for brains to make it's not so hard on a brain. So that's a place I like to start. Do you mind if we go backwards a little bit?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
One of the things we didn't really talk about. So I gave you kind of the short definition of what executive functions are. Yeah. They're like the brain skills that help us get our stuff done.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about like what some of those are.
Yeah, sure.
Your people are smart. They probably have figured some of this out. But we're talking about things like, yes, organization. planning, prioritizing tasks, but also things like self-checking, like, oh, self-monitoring. Am I doing the thing I was supposed to be doing? I'm not sure I'm doing the thing. And just the ability to check yourself.
Yes.
We're talking about things like task initiation. So
Mhm.
getting started, I would say, is like 99% of the people who come to me, this is a big challenge. Not on the fun things. Most people have a relatively easy time getting started on something they're excited about, but getting
Absolutely.
started on the boring stuff,
Yeah.
that task initiation is really, really difficult. So those are the sorts of things we're talking about. There's other things, working memory, there's finishing task, not only getting started, but like finishing a task.
Yeah.
And you can imagine, like in a classroom for homeschoolers, parents, teachers, all the things, all the skills that have to be in place for a student to do a task, to sit, like independent work, for example, like sitting at a table or a desk and do your work, requires a whole lot of things. First, there have to be no distractions. Then you have to be able to get started without help. Then you have to be able to sit there and stick to it. And then you have to, what if something comes up? Can you be flexible to sort of make a change? And so I just think it's important to note all of those little things.
Absolutely. Well, and even backing up to, sitting down, being able to sit down and get started, the distraction part, a lot of times, something that was really impactful to me being a public school teacher was, hungry. Are you hungry? Are you cold? Are you feeling safe? Like all those things. And thankfully in our homeschool, I can be like, here's a snack, eat breakfast while you do this. You want to eat lunch early? Let's do it while we work on this. That's fine. So we can kind of meet all those needs. But for our online students, for our in-school students, this is something else that we kind of need to be very cognizant
Absolutely.
of, so that they can then venture out into,
Absolutely.
cognition land to actually build.
You can't do any of that stuff. You can't do any of that stuff. I mean, you asked the question about like, what are some ways to preempt it? There's another great one, right? Like, not that you can always feed the kids in your classroom, but what about moving your body? Like, when's the last time you stood up? What about, offering different types of seating in a classroom so that a child who's feeling, first of all, the child has to know what's happening. So there's a little bit of self-awareness that has to be there. But do I need to stand up? I think I need to stand up. Or can I go to the standing desk? Or can I go sit on the bouncy ball? Or whatever it is. But acknowledging that, food, exercise, sleep, or food, movement, sleep. We can't do much about the sleep, but we can sure do something about like, hey, did you bring a snack? Or the moving your body part.
Absolutely. And especially for those who are watching, who are homeschoolers, because I think that's most of the people who are watching are going to be thinking about that. Yes, we pride ourselves on being able to wear our pajamas to school. But I think this is so important. We've really experienced this year with our 8-year-old who does well at a lot of things, but just has a lot of trouble with reading. And so she can read. She's doing so much better. But it was this conversation of sitting down and saying, what do you need? It's going to be different from your 3 other siblings. That's totally fine. Hey, why does she get to sit on the ball? That's totally fine. That's just what she needs right now. And so having those conversations and making sure that, yes, this is an option. The other kid wants to sit in his bed and use, a big lap desk. That's fine with him because he loves being snuggly. The other one wants to sit on my lap. She needs some tension. She needs some pressure on her body. And that's fine. Let's do that. The older one wants to be as far away from the rest of us as possible and find some quiet. And that's fine. But I think it's really important to take advantage. If you do have the option of a bouncy ball, a chair, a rubber band on the legs of the chair, all these things that we can kind of offer and give them a menu of what do you need today.
And noticing too, like I use the word notice a lot in my practice with clients. Like, what do you notice? Like about all of it, like whether we're talking about looking at the schedule for the week, what do you notice? Ooh, I notice it's full and I have very little time to do homework. What do you notice? Like, what are the patterns that you're noticing in if you're homeschooling, right? That you notice that this particular child really like gravitates towards the bed. So like that's good, right? That's a pattern. You can work with that. That's good information. So I'm right with you there. I think that's so nice to be able to have those options. And you're with a smaller group of kids, right? Than a classroom teacher. And so your noticing ability is like better. You
Shrunk
have
down.
shrunk down.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those things that I feel like for those who don't come to homeschooling with a teaching background, I want people to feel like, hey, homeschool is not school at home. Please don't make it school at home. This is one of the benefits that you really need to lean into. So what are some of the steps that we can take? We talked about noticing, talked about kind of offering options. Are there any other steps that people can kind of take, and if they're really just getting started with homeschool, set up their kids with great EF?
Well, this is my favorite part. I mean, I love talking about brains, but I love talking about strategies. One of the things that I say all the time is to figure out ways to make the invisible visible. So like, I'm just looking at your board in the back. Like, I'm not quite sure what all that stuff is for, but I bet it's important. And making things that are invisible visible. So that could mean lots of things. It could mean writing something on the board. It could mean, because here's the thing is like, there's a lot of invisible stuff in the world. Like time is invisible. Hello. That's what clocks and calendars and things are for, but so are chores, and so are expectations, and so is the agenda for the day. But if, as much as possible, if we can keep stuff kind of in our face, then we're much more likely to be aware of it, to remember to do it. I get a lot of people who come to me and they say like, people tell me all the time, just make a list. I'm like, I love a list. I'm not going to say I don't love a list, but the list has to be visible.
Yeah.
I have other opinions about lists and things like that. But anyway, making things visible.
Totally.
Right. So, and in a classroom is a perfect way to do that. You often write things down. You often show videos. You often look at images. But to be aware that just me saying an instruction out loud is maybe not enough for some brains. Some brains will figure it out. Yeah. But to make that more visible. So that's like, I don't know if it's a step, but that's like thing number one that I always like to talk about is to figure out
it is
the invisible.
Totally. And a lot of times, especially in a homeschool setting, in a classroom setting, we've all seen it, that on the left side of the whiteboard, everybody's got their rundown, this period, this is what we're going to do, whatever. So that's there. But also in a homeschool, that can look different. Every kid, for example, in our family has a checklist paper that we cheapo laminated with, packing tape. And they know that they get to check it off once they've done it. But it has to be seen by me in order to be checked off. And so that way they can kind of mentally plan. And choice is really big for us. That's something that I really want them to take ownership there, but they need to know what's expected. And yes, I've told them 8,000 times, but that's invisible. So you're giving me words for what we're doing, and I love it. So great. All right. What else? So that's kind of step number one.
Well, I would suspect that in order to have a homeschool, you would probably, this is not surprising to you, but another, sort of rule or I don't know, thing that I tell people in terms of organization is that the goal is that everything needs a home. Like every single thing needs one predictable place where you can always find it. Now that's super simple, but it's not always easy, right? Like to first of all, to select the home for the thing, but also to be in charge of them, as you probably are. But there's something, again, it's about like making it easy on your brain, is that if you know that always the pencils are here, or if you know that so I ask my clients, like, what's the most annoying thing that you misplace? I hear phones all the time. I hear earbuds. I hear wallet, keys. These things are super annoying, right? Yeah. And so, but it's not always easy to just put it in the home. But anyway, that's one thing to think about, is that every single thing should have a home.
Yeah, totally. And our family is not the best at this, Carrie. You're pointing out something that we tried. I think last year at the end of the year, every kid had their own pencil case, which is logical, right? That makes sense. But like in our family, if I'm just cleaning up, like lunch is happening, it all gets dumped into one pencil case. I'm probably the culprit here, but figuring out one way to keep everybody's stuff organized. They all have a pile, but I feel like boxes might be better. Maybe I don't know. But other people have beautiful homeschool rooms with little cubbies, and that's lovely. We're just not aesthetic like that. And so but I think a box might be helpful. So something like that.
Another thing to think about too is that in terms of like students, their brain growing and getting better at this. Like, so I always tell parents, and I would say the same thing to you, any teacher at all, it's pretty important that you are not the one that puts it in the home, that like the child has to put it in the home multiple times in order for it to become sort of more routine. So something to think about, like maybe you create a home for the things, and then instead of you doing it, which I know is hard, we moms want to do it, just get it out of there. Maybe you say something like, I see something that's not in its home, or I saw your pencil and it was somewhere weird. So to have the child do that work is what's going to make a change over time.
Yeah. Very good. All right. I love it. Any other tips? These are really
How about
great.
one more? How about one more?
I love it.
Okay. Speaking of, like, I'm sharing lots of things, but it's little by little that the progress is made, right? Like nothing happens fast. Brains don't change very fast, but if there's like one really annoying thing, maybe that's the little thing that you focus on for a while. So this idea of little by little, like baby steps. In the executive function world, you'll hear it called chunking, which is baby steps, but also like taking a big assignment or a big project and breaking it into little tiny bits. So not only do I want to just recommend that nothing happens fast, just go slowly, give yourself a little bit of grace around that, but also taking a big task and making it into tiny steps is way better for brains that struggle with this stuff. Sometimes my students get an assignment, like a big, I don't know, paper or project or something, and it seems like a mountain. It's just feels enormous. So any way that teachers, parents can break it down, and sometimes even like ridiculously tiny bits. Maybe not ridiculous, that maybe that's not the best word. No, judgment, but really, really tiny pieces can really help brains.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So we're not going to go in tomorrow and overhaul the system. No. In order to do this though, do you have any recommendations? I mean, we talked about lists. Lists are great as long as they're visible. I'm thinking like for my own listing, I love Google Keep because it's like on my screen. If anybody has Gmail open on their computer, it's that little yellow light bulb. And it's a really great way to just keep everything front of mind. But for kids, what would you suggest? And we've talked a lot about little kids. So I mentioned like the visual checklist that they need to get done every day. Any other, maybe talking upper elementary, middle, high school kind of grades? What do you see working well there?
Well, I love a list for any human. Backing up just a tiny bit, like even if a child is not reading, you can create a checklist with images, pictures. Even better if the picture is of the child. Like let's say they have to hang up their coat, or I guess they're not coming to your classroom from outside, but a picture, literally a picture of the child hanging the coat, and you print it and make it into a list. So there's ways to do it for non-readers too. I still think a checklist is important. I have a middle schooler in my house, an 8th grader and a 5th grader, 2 kids. And we still use like a variation of a checklist. When they come home every afternoon, there are X number of things they're supposed to do. And they're written. We use magnets, like to physically move a magnet from one side to the other side so that they are sort of checking off their list. And visually can see what still needs to be done. But I do this with high school students. I do this with adults all the time. The thing about a to-do list or a checklist is that it has to be small, achievable. So I talk to my students a lot about dopamine in your brain. So this brain chemical that's like the feel-good chemical in our brain. And we can kind of trick ourselves into earning a little bit of dopamine. But the goal, whatever the goal is, has to be achievable. Like our brain has to think we can do it. And then there's the proof, like that's the checking off the list or the moving of the magnets, like I mentioned. And so in terms of older kids, I still have a list. Could be a sticky note, could be a whiteboard, could be in your binder. I don't care where it is. Could be digital, although it's out of sight. So I don't know how I sort of go back and forth about digital things. But it has to be attainable. Like we cannot have 50 things on a list, which is why if any students are watching or parents are watching of students who are not homeschoolers and they have a learning management system,
Right.
my kids use one called Canvas.
Mm-hmm.
They're great, but let's say you have 15 missing assignments. If you're in high school, it will list all 15 in one spot. And that your brain is like, I can't.
Right. Well, which gets us back to what you had mentioned earlier with getting started on stuff. That's one of the bigger challenges here. Any ideas on that? I mean,
lots of
start
them.
with, because I want to hear your thoughts on this. Like the idea of my checklist, which I have divided into like kind of my 6 big areas of my work. And I always start with the things that are going to take me 5 minutes or less. They need to leave my list immediately. And so that seems
Great
most
strategy.
like great. Okay, cool.
Sure.
Check for me.
But sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, right? Like, so I say to people, sure, you could start with the easy ones because that gets a little momentum, right? Sometimes it makes sense to start with the harder ones or the ones that are going to take you longer because you're fresher in the morning. So there's I call this eating your frog. Have you heard this frog quote out there on the interwebs? It's some quote. I think that originally people said it was Mark Twain, but it's been debunked. Doesn't matter. But it's something like, if you wake up every morning and you eat a live frog, then the rest of your day will be better or something.
Okay. So get the yucky stuff out of the way.
Exactly. So sometimes we can convince our brains to just eat the frog, right? Not always, but sometimes. So either way, like the fast things, the hard things, depending, I would say, what do you notice about your energy level or when your brain is feeling like toast? Like, are you going to, at the end of the day, want to eat your frog? Oh, if not, then maybe try to attack at least pieces of the frog. That's gross. Pieces of the frog in the morning or earlier in the day. So those are 2 strategies. Another thing, honestly, is just using a timer. So I think people have sort of a misconception about getting started, meaning that we need to get motivated in order to start. Like, muster up some motivation. But what I've learned about brains is it's actually the other way around, is that we have to just start and then the motivation comes. And so sometimes I will say, all right, well, what's realistic? How long can you possibly focus on this really, really boring thing? And set a timer. Maybe it's really short. Like maybe you're like, it is so boring, 7 minutes. But maybe 20, maybe 30, I don't know. And then actually set a timer, because that also earns a little dopamine. Like, okay, I think I can do it. And the proof that you met your goal is the beep, 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 beep of the timer, right?
It is visible, audible in this case, but
right? There are some timers that are visible. I love the audible part. So, I mean, that's a great strategy. Timers are an awesome tool.
I love it. Yeah. Our kids use these all the time. We have a defunct phone that the sound doesn't work on it. So it really only serves as a timer. And so our kids just carry it around the house and they kind of share it together. Yeah. But this makes a lot of sense. And especially for our kids who perhaps this to-do list feels too big or just unattainable, chunking, and similar to what we did in school, right? You've got recess. Recess is, 15, 20, 30 minutes, perhaps mid-morning when they need to get the yayas out. It's there for a reason. And so kind of giving them, hey, go bike for 15 minutes upstairs. We'll see you later. That sort of thing is super helpful for a lot of us.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
movement is always a good idea. When you're stuck too, like stand up, walk around, get a glass of water and come back. Just that much of movement can be, not always, but.
No, totally. Well, these are such helpful tips. I'm really excited. I think the visible part is something that's really going to stick with me. So thank you for that. Now, you are full of amazing things. So what else can people do to get in touch with you? I know you have an amazing blueprint. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I do. Yeah. And some, I have I call it Get the Brain on Board. And it's I call it like my blueprint to help your school age child get things done without constant reminders. That's the goal. Yes. But you can find that my website is just my name. So carriebonnett.com/blueprint. So that's a really freebie, easy thing. But then I also have other resources on my website that you'll find there as well. So carriebonnett.com is where people can find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. All right. Well, one thing I always end up with is asking people what they enjoy about the space that they're in. So, what do you enjoy about your role in education at the moment?
I would have to say, you can probably imagine a lot of the students that come to me have brain differences, learning differences, things like autism and ADHD and other things like that. So I love that I am in a space where I can help kids who sort of feel like lesser than, or they
Mhm,
can't do school, or feeling kind of shame about
mhm.
the way their brain works. I love being able to work with them and help them understand that it's just a brain thing. It's just a
Yeah,
brain thing. It's not a
yeah,
character flaw. You're not a terrible
that's
human because you have trouble getting started on boring stuff. So
oh
I
my
love that
gosh.
about
Well,
my work.
that's amazing. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You guys go say thank you to Carrie. Go check out that blueprint. And if nobody's told you yet today, thank you for doing what you're doing. It is important, and happy teaching.
Thank you.